Welcome to today's deep dive. We are super glad you're here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
So, right now, inside the device you are using to listen to this, there are microscopic sensors fighting this silent, desperate war against the rigid laws of thermodynamics.
It's pretty intense when you really think about it.
Right. They're making thousands of micro adjustments every single second just to keep your machine from literally melting down. And, we all use computers constantly. They basically run our
Oh,
lives.
totally. We rely on them for everything.
But the second a screen goes black or the fan starts screaming or the whole system crashes, these incredibly logical machines suddenly feel like inscrutable magic boxes.
Yeah, they just feel like they were designed specifically to ruin your day.
Exactly. So today, our mission is decoding the secret language of your computer's cries for help. We're taking a whole stack of expert notes on hardware diagnostics and we're translating them for you. So, okay, let's unpack this. Because a computer crash isn't actually a failure, is it?
No, it's really not. And that is a crucial shift in perspective. It's actually communication.
A communication, I like that.
Yeah, the system is constantly trying to tell you what is wrong, provided, you know, where to look and how to interpret the signals. I mean, a motherboard doesn't operate on magic.
Sure feels like it sometimes, though.
True, true. But it operates on strict binary logic and electrical thresholds. When something violates those parameters, the machine has a highly structured protocol for sounding the alarm.
So it's not a mystery box at all. It's just speaking a dialect we need to learn.
Exactly.
Let's trace this chronologically then, starting at the very first electrical impulse. You push the power button on your case.
Right, so the power supply wakes up and sends this power good signal to the motherboard.
Okay.
And in those few seconds before the operating system even tries to load, the computer runs something called the PST, the power on self test.
Right, the PST, which is kind of like doing a quick pat down before you leave the house, right?
Mhm.
Like wallet, keys, phone.
That's a great analogy, actually. Yes, it's the system's fundamental reality check. The central processing unit, the CPU, essentially wakes up and polls the critical buses.
It's taking attendance.
Basically, it sends out signals asking, hey, is the system memory installed and responding? Is there a video subsystem capable of displaying output? Are the keyboard and base input devices present?
And it needs an answer from all of those.
It requires an affirmative handshake from all of those core components before it even dares to hand control over to an operating system.
And if it doesn't get that handshake,
The boot process just halts right there.
wow. But what I find really fascinating in the diagnostic notes is how the motherboard communicates a POST failure if, say, the video card is the thing that's broken.
Right, because you can't see anything.
Exactly. If the screen is dead, it resorts to audio. It actually beeps. Now, I always assumed these beep codes were standardized, like Morse code for hardware. 3 short beeps always means RAM failure or whatever.
Yeah, a lot of people think that. But looking at the sources, that is a complete myth.
Wait, really? It's a myth.
Oh, it is a chaotic landscape out there. There is zero universal standardization for beep codes across the industry.
You're kidding. So what do the beeps even mean?
Well, historically, companies like AMI or Phoenix and Award, they all wrote their own basic input-output systems, the BIOS.
Nice, BIOS.
So they each invented their own proprietary diagnostic language. A sequence of, say, 1 long beep and 2 short beeps might indicate a video adapter failure on an Asus motherboard.
Okay.
But on a gigabyte board, that exact same beep code could mean a fatal memory error.
Oh, wow. Which means memorizing them is a complete waste of time.
An absolute waste. Please don't try to memorize them.
So the actual takeaway here isn't learning the codes, it's knowing that the motherboard manual is basically the Rosetta Stone.
Exactly.
You just count the cadence of the beeps, pull up the PDF manual for your specific motherboard model on your phone, and just match the pattern.
Precisely. Because it points you directly to the faulty hardware slot. You're isolating the failure domain before the software even enters the equation.
That is so smart. Okay, so assuming the hardware passes the PST, there is another really fascinating early boot anomaly that the notes say technicians see constantly.
Oh, the time traveler computer.
Yes, you turn it on, Windows loads, but the system clock thinks it is like midnight, January 1st, 2005.
Yeah, the dreaded CMOS battery failure.
I love the physical reality of this. We tend to think of time on a computer as something synced via the internet, but fundamentally, it's tracked locally, isn't it?
It is. Down on the motherboard, there is a tiny quartz crystal oscillator.
A crystal.
Yeah, and it's vibrating exactly 32,768 times a second just to track time. But to keep that crystal vibrating when the PC is unplugged from the wall, it needs a localized power source.
Enter the CMOS battery.
Right. It relies on this little CR2032 lithium coin cell battery. It provides a constant 3-volt trickle to the real-time clock chip.
But like all batteries, it dies eventually.
Lithium cells degrade, so when the voltage drops too low, the oscillator just...
And then what happens?
Well, the moment you pull the power cable out of the wall, the motherboard's internal state just vanishes. When you power it back on, the system has to default to the factory baseline date that was compiled into its firmware.
So if your PC forgets what year it is every time you unplug it, you don't have some crazy software virus.
No, you just have a dead 3-volt watch battery.
That is so wild. Now, I have to challenge a very persistent piece of internet lore regarding that little battery.
Okay, let's hear it.
For years, I've seen forums claim that popping that battery out for 5 minutes is this master key hacker trick.
Oh boy.
Supposedly, it wipes the BIOS completely, including any administrator passwords locking down the hardware. I assume modern security architecture doesn't rely on a removable watch battery?
No, that is a legacy myth that just refuses to die.
So it used to be true.
In the 1990s, yes. BIOS configurations and passwords were often stored in volatile CMOS RAM, which required that continuous battery trickle to retain data. Pull the battery, drop the voltage, clear the memory.
But not anymore.
Not for a long time. For well over a decade, motherboard manufacturers have used non-volatile RAM NVRAM to store security credentials. And NVRAM retains its state without any external power whatsoever.
So pulling the battery today just annoys the user by resetting their clock. The password remains totally baked into the silicon.
Correct. If you want to clear modern hardware passwords, you typically have to locate a specific physical jumper block on the motherboard, bridge 2 specific pins to short or reset circuit, and follow this whole manufacturer-specific sequence.
Wow, okay. So it requires actual physical access and deliberate intent.
Exactly, not just popping a battery out.
That makes a lot more sense. Okay, let's push forward in the boot sequence. The hardware passes POS, the clock is ticking, but the system refuses to load the operating system.
It just hangs on a black screen.
Right, with just a blinking cursor. And according to the source notes, a massive percentage of the time, this happens just because someone left a random USB thumb drive plugged into the front of the case.
It's so common. And this all comes down to the boot order priority defined in the BIOS. Well, the motherboard needs to know where to find the bootloader. If a user, say, recently reinstalled Windows, they might have set the USB ports as the primary boot device, above the internal solid-state drive.
Okay, I follow.
So if a non-bootable flash drive is left plugged in, the BIOS queries it, finds data but no operating system kernel, and simply halts.
It just gives up. It doesn't check the main drive.
No, it does not automatically fall back to the internal drive unless explicitly instructed to. It's a logic loop. It did exactly what it was told to do, checked the USB, and then it just waited for further instructions.
It's the ultimate user error disguised as a hardware failure.
100%.
So let's say we navigate all of that. The bootloader finds the OS. We transition from the realm of hardware initialization to the handoff. And this is where we encounter the visual cries for help.
A completely blank screen.
Yeah. Where do you even start with that?
A black screen post-boot is where technicians really have to apply Occam's razor. Before suspecting a fried graphics processing unit, you interrogate the physical connections.
Like, is it actually plugged in?
Literally, yes. Is the monitor receiving power? And beyond that, you check for an input mismatch.
Oh, like HDMI versus DisplayPort.
Exactly. If the graphics card is pushing a digital DisplayPort signal, but the monitor's firmware is actively locked to an analog VGA input, the screen remains black.
So the data is flowing, but the receiver is just listening on the wrong frequency.
Yep.
And sometimes I read in the notes, it's not actually black, it's just incredibly dim. Like if you shine a flashlight directly against the panel, you can faintly see your desktop icons.
That is a classic symptom.
That's a backlight failure, right? The LCD panel is still forming all the pixels, but the light source projecting them to your eyes has burned out.
That is the exact mechanism. The power inverter for the backlight died.
Okay, but what about a scenario where the screen functions perfectly during the motherboard manufacturer logo? You see the Windows spinning circle, and then the precise millisecond your desktop is supposed to appear, the screen just goes pitch black.
Oh, that is such a specific, frustrating failure for users.
I've always thought of it like a relay race where the baton gets dropped. Because during the initial boot, the system uses a basic universal display adapter, right? Just enough logic to push generic pixels to the screen.
Right, it's very rudimentary.
But when Windows fully loads, It attempts to hand control over to the highly complex proprietary driver designed for your specific AMD or NVIDIA graphics card.
And if that driver is corrupted, or if it tries to push a refresh rate your monitor physically cannot support, the operating system effectively blinds itself.
It just crashes the display pipeline,
It blinds itself because the kernel is relying on software instructions that are fundamentally flawed.
which puts you in a total catch-22. You need to uninstall the bad driver, but you obviously can't see the screen to click on the uninstaller.
Right, and that's where the source notes mention VGA mode, or what we now commonly call safe mode. It's your diagnostic safety net.
The old F8 trick.
Exactly. By interrupting the boot process,
Mm.
usually by holding Shift while restarting or letting it fail 3 times, you force the Windows kernel to load with a minimal set of generic drivers.
Okay. It intentionally bypasses the registry keys that load your high-performance graphics driver. You get a terrible low-resolution display, but you regain visibility.
Which is all you need. From there, you strip out the corrupted software and reinstall clean drivers.
Exactly.
Okay, so a blank screen is frustrating, but at least the computer is still functioning in the background.
Yeah.
What happens when the operating system actively commits suicide to save itself? That brings us to the elephant in the room. The blue screen of death, the BSOD.
It is universally feared, and understandably so because of the immediate data loss. But I want to completely reframe the BSOD for you.
Okay, let's reframe it.
The blue screen is not a hostile attack by a failing machine. It is actually a vital self-preservation mechanism.
Really? Self-preservation?
Yes, it is a forensic crime scene left intentionally by the operating system to help you.
Okay, walk us through the forensics of that. What actually triggers it?
A blue screen is a kernel panic.
Kernel panic sounds dramatic. It is. The Windows kernel, which is the absolute core of the operating system, has detected an anomaly so severe that continuing to operate would risk corrupting the file system or permanently damaging hardware.
Like what kind of anomaly?
Perhaps the driver tried to access a restricted memory address or a hardware interrupt just failed completely. Rather than risking your data, the kernel throws the emergency brake.
It just stops everything cold.
It halts all processes, dumps the contents of system memory into a diagnostic file on your drive, and paints the screen blue to display the fatal exception code.
And the sources highlight specific codes like 0x Charlie 000000135. To a normal user, that's just alphanumeric gibberish.
Right.
But that's an actual memory address, isn't it?
It is a hexadecimal code pointing directly to the fault. The blue screen provides a stop code, often with a specific driver name listed right below it, like entoskirnl.exe or a specific network driver.
And you can just look those up.
Yes. Microsoft maintains a public index of these stop codes. By searching that exact string, you transition from guessing to knowing. It might tell you that your specific wireless card driver caused a page fault in a non-paged area.
So instead of slamming your fist on the desk in panic, you should be taking a photo of that screen with your phone.
Always take a picture. It's the literal roadmap to the fix.
And you can apply that same logic to application-level crashes, too. The notes detail some really bizarre proprietary software errors, things like error 47829, frame buffer not supported, or a pop-up saying loader by 86.cpp is not accessible.
Right. Those errors are super intimidating because they strip away the polished user interface. You are looking at raw, unfiltered diagnostic output.
Just raw code.
Exactly. Like a file ending in .cpp is a C++ source code file. That error means the application had an unhandled exception and is literally vomiting its internal architecture onto your screen.
It's exposing the scaffolding. The developers never intended for a consumer to see loader by 86.cpp.
Never. And because it's developer-facing code, trying to paraphrase it to technical support is completely useless.
You can't just say, it gave me a by 86 error.
Right. You must capture the exact syntax, every bracket, every decimal point. It points the software engineer to the exact line of code that failed in their repository.
So screenshot it,
Yeah.
always. Now, speaking of tracking down software failures, there is a built-in tool in Windows that I discovered in the notes, and it kind of blew my mind. The Reliability Monitor.
Oh, it's such a hidden gem.
Most people only know about Task Manager or maybe Event Viewer, and Event Viewer is an absolute nightmare to read.
It really is. Event Viewer logs thousands of routine background operations alongside critical errors, making it basically impossible to parse for a normal user.
But Reliability Monitor takes all those cryptic logs and turns them into a clean visual timeline.
It is arguably the most underutilized diagnostic tool in Windows. Reliability Monitor filters out all that noise. It presents a daily graph scoring your system's stability from 1 to 10.
Which is so much easier to read.
Exactly. You can click on a day from 2 weeks ago and see that precisely at 2:12 p.m., a silent background update for your audio driver failed. And that correlates perfectly with when your microphone started dropping out on calls.
It connects the temporal dots for you. It's an incredible auditing tool. But okay, let's pivot the narrative here.
Okay.
A hard crash or a blue screen leaves a clear forensic trail. But what happens when the computer is dying, but refuses to leave a clue?
No error messages.
Right. No blue screens, no pop-ups, just an agonizing, painful sluggishness. The slow crawl.
That is almost more frustrating for users.
Absolutely. So what causes that?
Well, when a system crawls without throwing an error, the operating system actually believes it is functioning normally. So you have to investigate resource allocation. Your primary dashboard for this is the task manager.
You're looking for the resource hogs.
Right. You are looking for anomalies in CPU, memory, or disk input-output operations. Often you'll find a memory leak, where a poorly coded browser tab just continues to consume RAM until the system is forced to constantly swap data back and forth to the storage drive.
Which just crushes performance.
Completely crushes it.
But sluggishness isn't always software. The sources point out a specific hardware throttle, especially on laptops, that is tied directly to power states.
Yes, power state scaling. Processors use technologies like Intel's SpeedStep to dynamically adjust their clock speeds.
To save battery. Right.
Exactly. A laptop's primary mandate is battery life. So when you unplug the power adapter, the operating system aggressively throttles the CPU multiplier. It intentionally downclocks the processor to consume fewer watts.
So if you are rendering a 4K video and you pull the plug,
The system instantly sacrifices performance to preserve battery life. It will slow to a crawl.
but what if you are plugged into the wall, your task manager shows low CPU usage, and the computer is still stuttering when you just drag a window across the screen?
That brings us to the invisible killer of all electronics.
Thermodynamics. Heat.
Thermal throttling is the silent executioner of performance. You have to remember, processing requires immense electrical current. Millions of microscopic silicon transistors are flipping states billions of times a second.
And the physical byproduct of all that electrical resistance is massive heat generation.
Yes. And heat is the enemy of silicon.
If transistors get too hot, electron leakage occurs, right? Like the calculations literally start corrupting.
They do. And if the heat climbs even further, electron migration occurs. The physical structure of the chip actually begins to degrade.
So the computer has to stop that from happening.
Right. To prevent the CPU from reaching its thermal junction maximum and literally destroying itself, modern processors have dozens of microscopic thermal diodes embedded directly into the silicon die. They monitor temperature in real time.
So if the heatsink is caked in a thick layer of dust and the fan can't push the hot air out of the chassis,
The CPU knows it's suffocating. It knows. And its survival mechanism is to immediately slash its own clock speed and reduce its voltage. It deliberately processes data slower to generate less heat.
this is thermal throttling.
Yes, the system is crawling because sprinting would kill it.
It's exactly like a marathon runner deliberately slowing their pace so they don't pass out from heat exhaustion.
That is a perfect analogy.
And because Windows won't pop up a notification saying, hey, I'm hot, you have to monitor it yourself. The diagnostic notes recommend third-party utilities like HW Monitor from CPUI.
This great tool.
I use this all the time. It queries those hardware sensors and gives you a raw temperature readout. If your CPU cores are hovering at 95 or 100 degrees Celsius while you're just browsing the web, you don't need a software update.
No, you do not.
You need a can of compressed air.
The solution is purely physical. Reestablishing airflow is the only fix for thermal throttling.
Which transitions us perfectly into our final phase. Heat leads us to the physical reality of these machines. When thermodynamics wins, things break down mechanically.
And that's when things get loud.
Yeah, there is a visceral dread when your normally silent computer starts making aggressive noises. Let's decode the mechanical failures. Say you pick up a desktop case to clean it, and you hear a distinct metallic rattling inside.
A heavy rattle during movement indicates a physical separation. The most common culprit is a large, aftermarket CPU heatsink that is vibrated loose from its retention bracket.
And that's bad.
This is critical. The heatsink relies on perfectly flush contact with the processor, which is facilitated by thermal paste.
Right, that highly conductive compound that fills the microscopic air gaps.
Exactly. If the heatsink comes loose, that thermal paste seal breaks, and you cannot simply snap it back on. You must clean the CPU lid with isopropyl alcohol and apply fresh thermal compound, or the heat transfer will fail entirely.
Okay, here's a sound that makes my blood run cold. A high-pitched, metallic scraping noise coming from the chassis.
Oof, that is the sound of catastrophic data loss.
The hard drive.
Yes. Traditional mechanical hard drives store data on magnetic platters spinning at 7,200 revolutions per minute. The read-write heads do not touch the platters. They hover on a microscopic cushion of air generated by the rotational aerodynamics.
The gap is literally measured in nanometers?
It is. So a scraping sound means the aerodynamic lift has failed.
Mm-hmm.
The head is physically contacting the spinning platter at high speed, physically gouging the magnetic coating, and destroying the data.
A head crash. If you hear that, you don't run diagnostics. You power off immediately and pray you have a backup.
Absolutely.
What about a methodical, rhythmic clicking, like click, tick, click?
That points to a rotational obstruction. It's almost always a failing cooling fan. Fans rely on fluid dynamic or ball bearings to spin smoothly.
And they wear out.
As those bearings dry out over years of extreme heat exposure, the fan destabilizes on its axis, causing the blades to strike the housing rhythmically. Or, sometimes a wire may have just drooped into the blade pass.
All of those are unnerving. But the notes detail a truly spectacular failure mode. You are working, you hear a loud, sharp pop, like a small firecracker, and suddenly the distinct, acrid smell of ozone and burning chemicals fills the room.
When you experience a thermal event with physical smoke, software troubleshooting is over.
Yeah, I would think so.
Your immediate split-second priority is to sever the AC power from the wall. You have to halt the electrical short and limit the scope of the fire hazard. Do not attempt to shut down windows. Pull the cord.
Just rip it out. And once the system is inert, what then?
Once it's safe, you are diagnosing with your eyes and your nose. You are looking for scorch marks on the fiberglass of the motherboard.
And the sources highlight a specific component notorious for popping: electrolytic capacitors.
Motherboards are completely littered with capacitors. They look like tiny vertical cylinders, almost like miniature soda cans.
And what do?
Their function is power delivery. They act as microscopic reservoirs, storing and filtering the electrical charge to ensure the CPU receives a perfectly smooth, stable voltage curve, devoid of any spikes or ripples.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. I was reading about how these actually work. Inside that tiny aluminum can, there are layers of conductive foil separated by paper soaked in a liquid electrolyte. It's essentially a chemical battery.
It is. It's a chemical component operating in a highly hostile thermal environment. Over years of absorbing electrical noise and heat, the liquid electrolyte inside the capacitor can boil and begin to off-gas.
Which creates immense internal pressure.
Immense!
And you can actually see this failing before it pops, right?
Yes, you can. If you look closely at the top of an electrolytic capacitor, manufacturers stamp a subtle K or X shape into the aluminum.
I always thought that was just a logo.
Nope. It is an engineered weak point, a pressure relief valve. A healthy capacitor has a perfectly flat top, but as the internal gas expands, that scored top will begin to physically bulge outward into a dome.
It looks like a canned good that's gone completely bad in your pantry.
Exactly like that. And when the pressure exceeds the structural integrity of the aluminum, it ruptures violently through that scored cross.
Oh.
That is the pop you hear. And the vaporized electrolyte is the smoke you smell. Once a capacitor blows, the voltage regulation to the CPU is compromised, causing total system instability. It usually means the motherboard is dead.
We spend all day talking about virtual environments, cloud computing, artificial intelligence. It all feels so ethereal and abstract.
It does.
But underneath every sprawling spreadsheet and globally connected database, it all relies on the physical integrity of a tiny, pressurized cylinder of chemicals holding an electrical charge. When the chemistry fails, the virtual world evaporates.
That's beautifully said. Hardware is the anchor. Software is merely an abstract concept until it is executed through physical silicon, copper, and electrolyte. Understanding the physical limitations of the hardware is the only way to truly understand how the software behaves.
Which brings us full circle on our journey today. We started at the very genesis of the boot sequence, decoding the POSD beeps and the quiet, persistent ticking of the CMOS quartz crystal. We translated the visual forensic evidence left behind on a blue screen of death and learned how to leverage the timeline of the reliability monitor.
We covered a lot of ground.
We really did. We examined the physics of thermal throttling and the desperate measures processors take to avoid melting. And finally, we tracked the visceral, mechanical failures of head crashes and ruptured capacitors.
It's an immense amount of engineering, all functioning seamlessly until the moment it doesn't. but every failure leaves a signature.
Every crash is a communication. And to leave you with a final thought to ponder for this deep dive, consider the silent vigilance of your machine.
Yeah.
As you shut down your computer tonight, think about the millions of microscopic sensors, the fluid dynamic bearings, and the voltage regulators that just spent hours negotiating the raw forces of electricity and heat on your behalf.
They're working hard.
They really are. Your computer isn't just a static tool, it is a highly reactive, self-preserving ecosystem working tirelessly to keep your digital life afloat. The next time you hear a quiet hum from your machine as the fans spin up under a heavy workload, you'll know exactly what invisible war it's fighting.